Welcome back to our main stage presentations. Up next, we've got Daniel Murphey. Daniel has been tech writing for 8 years, UX writing for 2, and has been working with WebEx events, formerly known as Socio, for a little over 2 years. Daniel and his wife and 3 children live in Indiana and are enjoying more and more freedom to go and do now that their youngest is getting a bit older, I think. He loves playing and designing tabletop games, listening to podcasts and audiobooks, doing home projects, working out, and knowing too much about J.R.R. Tolkien. So, trying out my best Sir Ian McKellen impersonation. A wizard is never late, nor is he early. Please welcome Daniel Murphey.
Thank you for that introduction. Thanks to the Write the Docs community for having me here. Thank you all for showing up to the talk. I do not claim to be a wizard, and I don't remember that I put that quote on there, but I'm glad he brought it up because anytime I can talk about Tolkien, I will. So I'd like to get straight to it, so let's jump into a definition of what release ready means. So if you Google the term, you'll find a variety of results, one of which is a blog post on the Test Launch blog that contains this quote: "Release readiness is the practice of preparing the entire team and your customers for changes." So it's a set of practices that a product team can use to make sure that everybody, all the stakeholders in the company and the customers, are all ready for release. Now this sounds great, but there may be a few thoughts running through some of your heads right now, such as, we're not product developers, some of you are. My company doesn't use Agile, and communication from product teams. That's a good joke. I didn't know this was stand-up. So, this isn't a talk about Agile practices, and I'm not here to tell you how to do Agile or get your company to do so. I'm also not out to write the official manual to Day One Docs. I propose this talk because I know the basic struggles of trying to keep a help center up to date. For the past 2 years, through small and huge releases, we've been able to keep our help center completely day one release accurate. And I want to share what's been consistently working for us in our situation month to month. So I hope that you'll all come away with ideas to hone your documentation processes, renewed confidence in your abilities, and a hope that release-ready docs can be a reality for you too. For those who are already living this, I hope that sharing our processes can help you do what you do even better. And for all of you non-writers in the crowd, I hope this gives you some context on the challenges that we as writers face and inspires you to get involved with the writers in your companies, if you have them, and be good friends to the docs. So what does release ready mean for us at WebEx events? What's our flavor? So, big cake in the sky. I'm going to break a cardinal rule of presentation, and I'm going to read a slide verbatim, so may the PowerPoint gods forgive me. Release ready means that we do the advanced work needed to make all of our Help Center articles and their translations accurate and complete within 24 hours of release. That's what it means to us. Now, in the context of release readiness as an Agile concept, I think of this as our piece of the puzzle as technical writers. Now, in the brief, I said that this can be a delight, and it really is, but that doesn't mean it's not a lot of work to pull off. There's a lot that goes into making this happen month after month, and as our products expand and grow, teams expand and grow, we learn more as technical writers, our processes grow, all that fun stuff. We're continuing to discover and adapt to new and bigger challenges. So some of what I talk about today may not hold true a year from now. We'll see. But I'm glad you're here to hear me for today. So that being said, what makes all the hard work worth it? Well, it keeps us sane. If there's a backlog of updates that are necessary for the product and we're behind on things, I personally tend to fret. It weighs on my mind. So when we click publish on the last update, on the day of a product release, and there's nothing hanging over our heads and we're ready for what's next, it's energizing and also very peaceful. It's just a nice place to be because we're completely ready for what's next. Our processes also keep our edits simple. We may edit between 20 and 50 articles to account for a normal release, air quotes normal, because what is normal? But since we keep everything up to date, only a handful of those are usually more than a couple of images and a paragraph, sometimes less. It's also about trust. When I'm using a product and I open up a help article that is clearly out of date, I'm probably going to assume that the other articles on the Help Center may be out of date as well. So I want everybody to trust that when they come to our Help Center, they can always find complete, accurate information, even including, the day something releases. And this blends into team support too. When a new product announcement goes out and our team starts getting emails from customers and prospects, they can just send them to the docs because the docs are already ready. And our folks read the articles too, our team members read the articles too, so that they can get up to speed on releases without having to sift through the more technical engineering specs that they often get. And now AI is on everyone's lips these days, and it has applicability here too. Intercom recently released a beta for a AI chatbot based on, you guessed it, GPT-4, that everyone's talking about. Now, the bot can read our Help Center and take excerpts from it to answer customer questions in chat, which is pretty cool, as long as the Help Center is up to date. If it's not, then the chatbot could, none the wiser, present outdated information as if it were fact. Now, we haven't adopted this chatbot yet at WebEx events. I don't know if we ever will, but I wanted to mention it because some of you may find it a compelling reason to adopt release-ready docs. It may also be leverage to convince various leaders and stakeholders in your companies to get resources that you need to be release-ready. So everyone's about AI. You can use it as leverage. And lastly, we do it for the glory. I forgot to put in the bio that I'm a goofball, so I'm a big goof, and I like GIFs, so there you go. Maybe I'm weird, but I love hearing that I'm awesome. Is it just me? Anybody? You guys like it? You like hearing that you're great? We hear from our team a lot, and it really puts fuel in our tank that we hear consistently from people that they really appreciate that the docs are always up to date and they can be confident in the documentation, that it's complete. I've gathered some screenshots here to give you a taste. So we've got Jessica and Janet here both showing some love for the enablement team at large, which includes our awesome learning content developers that do our academy. And then Yarkin, who's one of Socio's founders, expressing shock when we were able to pull off day one docs after we did a major redesign to our platform that affected a good 70% of articles. And that was a month, let me tell you. That was a weird month. So hopefully, that sounds really nice, and hopefully at this point you get the value of day one docs and you want to learn more. So here we go. If you don't want to learn more, the door's right over there, so goodbye. So how do we do it? Before we dive into specific processes, I want to mention these three foundational elements that underpin everything. So first, we must have documented processes to keep us on track and accountable and moving quickly. And this includes our style guide, records of the meetings and touch points we attend, and our general standards and service level agreements, all the little decisions that we make, day to day. And next, we have to be very organized and always have our planning hats on with an eye to the future, because if we don't do that, then we can't do this. And finally, we must nurture relationships and communication channels so we can know and plan for what's coming and enable others with our knowledge. We can't do what we do alone, and we don't. As we're continually working on our monthly cycles, members of our broader team submit feedback through a Typeform survey that we have for suggestions that they get from customers. I'm sure a lot of you are aware, we tend to work in a pretty pristine environment. I personally don't talk to customers a lot, so I rely heavily on contact from our support team, customer success managers, the people that are in the trenches every day, to enrich our documents with real-world applicability. We also have members of our broader team help with peer review, and some of our awesome Turkish support team members also jump in and help us with authoring certain types of articles. So big shout out to our Turkish support. So let's jump into the actual nuts and bolts of our process. So everything has to start with continual cyclical awareness. We can't prepare for what's coming in a meaningful way unless we have a pretty good detail on what's coming. So we make sure we maintain at least 2 months of visibility into the releases that are coming up, and we maintain that awareness through several channels. So first is the external roadmap that our product teams maintain. It's a great resource, but not always complete, so we also have established shared Slack channels that we have with product managers where we can ask them questions, they can let us know about changes to releases, and we can just generally communicate. We also have monthly pre-release meetings and touch points to dig into specifics about specific releases and get a good idea of what the release is going to affect. Aside from the external roadmap, we didn't really have most of these communication channels built up when I started at WebEx Events. No shade to my awesome manager, who was also my predecessor. Shout out to Mahalia. And we had to build better relationships with product and establish those early lines of communication. If that sounds hard or daunting, it was at times, and I'll give you some tips at the end of the presentation to help make that easier if you want to adopt this. We're continuing to refine how we communicate, and we forge into product or projects and areas that we've never been to before as a team. And because communication is open and welcomed, those discussions are generally just an ask away. So when we have visibility on an upcoming change, it's time to scope and plan our work. Initially, we do kind of a finger in the wind assessment, gut check analysis of how much of an impact we think the release is going to have. And quick note, I'm talking about a release. We have once a month release cadence. I've dealt with weekly release cadence before, bi-weekly release cadence, as needed release cadence. So this is all possible with a more scattered release cadence, but currently we're working with 1 month. So again, for a normal release, air quotes there, we tend to edit between 20 and 50 articles, like I said, and we'll wait and scope at the beginning of the month that the changes are scheduled to release. If it's a big one, we tend to scope as soon as we have visibility so that we can start work on future-proofing articles for those future releases. And I'll talk about future-proofing a little later. Why am I using my computer keys? I have the clicker thing. So, scoping includes, obviously, figuring out what new articles we're going to need and what existing articles need to be updated. We also note whether text or image changes or both are needed in the article and which parts of the release affect each article. And you'll see why that's important later as well. Now, Intercom is where we at WebEx Events currently author and publish our articles. And they've done some really great things with their Help Center over the past year to really elevate it to a much more usable level, I'll put it that way. However, Intercom has never had solutions for issue tracking or approval processes or audit cycles, that kind of thing. So we use Asana for our work tracking day to day. So for every article in Intercom, we have a corresponding Asana task. So put a pin in that thought as I continue. So our monthly release board that we kind of just use on a cycle looks like this. It's a very simple just to-do list because we want our main knowledge base board where we track drafting and review and post-review statuses to be our main source of truth for doing our articles. Having the article tasks both in the main board and in a release board has some really great benefits that I'll talk about in just a second. So again, keep a pin in that Asana idea. It also helps keep our custom fields and rules tidy. So those custom fields that we create to track, again, is it text changes? Is it image changes? What part of the release affects the article? Each of these tasks in Asana, like I said, corresponds to an article in Intercom. And the reason that we keep this 1-to-1 ratio, we don't just create a new task in Asana every time we make an edit, is that we get to preserve the historicity of the article. So we can leave each other comments, as you can see here on the left side screenshot there, with thoughts and notes and reminders for ourselves and for others. And then Asana itself keeps record of the journey of the article through our release boards and our main knowledge base board. So for a big release that we're scoping for long-term, like 2 to 3 months in advance, we create a brand new board more like this one. We add now versus later buckets based on what we can future-proof for now versus what has to wait for things to hit our staging environment. We also have a drafted column to track how much we've done at a glance, and a done column so we can tell if it's safe to publish other changes in an affected article. The only time something is moved to done pre-release is if we were able to completely future-proof the article's content against the release. So once we've scoped, it's time for the drafting. For a normal size release, we may not dig into meaningful edits until the second week of the month because we don't want to pile on a bunch of edits when we may need to publish unrelated edits from, let's say that typeform feedback that I talked about beforehand. We generally start out with just text changes as we get clarity on new processes and all the new buttons and stuff. And then we work on screenshots later as possible. So no matter why we're editing an article, we look for combo opportunities. So ways to look forward to future. Yes, I got him. He's laughing, everyone. Remember that. I made people laugh. Oh, this is a good day. Anyway. So for example, if an affected article has an audit due soon, we'll go ahead and grab those articles first and work on those. If someone submitted typeform feedback and we have that to do, then we may grab that article with the typeform feedback and do the release work and the feedback work at the same time, depending on how close the release is. If the release is still a couple weeks away, we'll probably hold off on the release edits and do the feedback and publish that first. I've lost my place. So we're always looking for ways to future-proof. Again, I'm talking about future-proofing a lot, and I'm about to talk about it more, so bear with me. Now, I've mentioned having a staging environment, and we are greatly helped by having a staging environment where that our product team uses to QA releases before they actually make the release. Now, some of you may not have this and are currently turning orange with jealousy. I hear some mm-hms, so I think I was right to call that out. If you don't, ask for it, because odds are your product teams do have something like that, so it could just be a matter of asking for it. If they don't have it, then you might have some bigger problems. Anyway, it is still possible to have release-ready docs without a staging environment, but it is bloody difficult, and it's nearly impossible for big releases that are affecting large swaths of image-heavy content. One caveat about staging environments that I do want to offer up before I move on is that we are very careful to pay attention to the spec for the releases. So if something doesn't look like it should for a release, we use that shared Slack channel I mentioned earlier. We hit up the product manager and say, hey, this doesn't look like it's supposed to. And they can confirm, deny, or say, I'll get back with you, which is usually the case. Fortunately, we haven't had many of those occurrences. So moving on, I have mentioned future-proofing quite a few times now, so I do want to talk about our basic future-proofing practices because these really help us in our processes of keeping everything up to date. So our help center is very image-rich. Big changes can mean lots of work. So having basic practices that allow us to gradually lighten the load for ourselves for future releases as we make changes for current releases has really made a big difference as we've faced those big releases. So our first tip that I'll share with you is simple screenshots. We use screenshots that show only the context that is necessary for comprehension. So as you can see in the bottom screenshot, we've cropped it just a little bit more than the top screenshot, but just that little bit, that little slice off the top has protected this image from two separate future releases that would have caused us to have to retake the screenshot. Next, we try to not to show dates in images. Now, this may seem like a small thing because it's just a date, but sometimes people will notice when a date is 2-3 years out of date, and they may assume that the image may have some problems in it. So if we're doing a screenshot that has just the current date, we'll go ahead and still bump that up a couple of years. So I use the Chrome console to just inspect, edit the date, change it up a couple of years, and then we're good to go. I proposed a lightning talk about using the Chrome console. We'll see if they pick up my option. So next, we adjust wording for later changes. So this is obviously about the text. So in this image, you can see this is the state of a little snippet of our current platform. We have these kind of gross yes/no toggles that I really just don't like. But in the next few months, we're going to be changing these toggles to something more like you would see in a smartphone settings, just a simple on-off toggle. So what we're doing to future-proof images like this is changing the wording that we're using when we talk about these toggles. Instead of saying yes or no in the documentation, we're saying activate or deactivate, so that by the time the release comes around, we will have all the text in place to accommodate just the image changes that we'll then have to do. And then finally, we practice safe exclusion, and we practice this carefully. So let's go back to when we were kids. Did any of you read the Highlights for Children magazine when you were kids? Yeah, there they are. So they had those spot the difference pictures, right? You can find those in all kinds of activity books. So who can spot the difference between these two pictures? Let me see a hand. Okay, front row.
Users and groups.
Yes, perfect. Users and groups is missing. So the reason that it's missing is because here in, I think, July, that menu item will be removed from this particular pocket of the menu structure and moved somewhere else. This particular menu is how you get around our platform, so it's everywhere. So what we've done is when this element to be removed is not the focus in a screenshot, we're going ahead and removing it from the screenshot and publishing it like that. Now, this may seem to contradict what I'm going for with release-ready docs and everything's accurate. And like I said, we do use this very carefully, and I think we've only used it once or twice. But it has been really helpful because it reduces that large amount of work that we would need to do to make our screenshots accurate later. So now that I've talked about some editing and the future proofing, I wanted to show you our main Asana board. So we track our day-to-day work using this board structure. And this organization is crucial. Like I said, organization is a crucial cog to how we make release-ready docs happen, one of those three foundations. So like I said, we track our work here every day, and as time has gone on, we've iterated on how we track things in Asana. Again, shout out to my manager, Mahalia, for introducing me to Asana. It changed my world. Our current model is, it follows this structure where it kind of is similar to a product release board, or at least some boards that I've seen. Articles start in one of two places. So a brand new article starts in proposed, and then articles that need edits, but we already published them, start in surprise, publish needs editing. And then from there, things work through drafting, review, post-review, publication, localization, and then completion. Now, because we want to be nimble and move quickly and be wise with our time, we don't always move articles through the whole cycle. We have a whole rubric for how we decide when we move things through the full process versus just making the edit, publishing the edit, leaving a comment on the task, and moving on with our dang life. So the goal is to move quickly and be sensible. Sometimes the I doesn't need the dot at the top. Now, I do want to quickly show you an individual article task to help you better understand our process and kind of tie in how we are using those multiple release boards effectively. If I can find my place again. So at the very top, you get to see I'm going to use the laser now. Oh yeah, there it is. At the very top, you get to see the projects that the article task is currently part of. The main knowledge base board, every task is always part of that. And then we have two different release boards that we have. There's a table UI release that was last month's release. And then we have a as yet to be released table merge and session change board for a release in July. So in the type field, we note what kind of, why we're currently editing the article, which is helpful for our peer reviewers to prioritize product releases over audits, over typeform feedback. Then we have a topic that just correlates to the topic in our help center. We have our next audit due date for our 6-month audit cycle. And then we have a field here where we've invited our customer experience people and our learning content developers, there we go, to come in here and let us know when they've used a link to an article in their own content, so that if we ever make drastic changes or remove an article, we can just let them know, hey, we've done this, and they can remove links from their content as necessary. We have the intercom ID in there just because it's useful for localization and a couple other things. And then at the very bottom, anytime we add an article to one of these release tasks, or boards, I should say, that board's custom fields are added to the article so that we can see at a glance what type of change is needed and which part of the release is affecting it. That didn't click. Why did it not click? There we go. So, and then this is just kind of the bottom. Like, the description has a link to the edit view for the intercom article, so we can just quickly jump over there and start editing things, and then the actual links that our team has put in there to their own content where they used a link. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. If it doesn't, you can ask me questions on Slido. So now that we've talked at length about our Asana setup, let's get back to the release process. So everything's drafted up in a nice pile. We've built up our edits. We have oodles of drafts ready to go. And release day rolls around, and our product team releases the code changes. They give us the thumbs up that the post-release QA was successful, and then we release. So y'all know how to click publish on an article, so I'm not going to show you how to do that. We do follow this specific process that I have here on the screen to make sure that we don't have any last-minute oopses. And we celebrate by letting out a nice big sigh of release. Everybody with me? That's nice. That's nice. Now, hopefully that all sounds pretty tidy and attainable, hopefully. But what happens when it's the big one? Nothing is perfect, and there's bound to be something massive and or unexpected that shakes everything up. With the April release that we just did, we were notified right at the tail end of March that some major changes we were expecting in July were happening right now. The changes that were introduced were, they affected about 140 of our 220 articles at the time and about 500 images. So when I realized how that was going to go down, I had a little lie down on the floor and just relaxed for 5 minutes. And once I collected my wits, we jumped into scoping like we always do. And we knew right away that we might not get everything done this time. And so I made sure to let my manager know and set the expectation this could be the one. This could break us. So we ended up scoping like this. So it'll look very similar to the long-term scope board that I showed earlier with a couple different tweaks. So we sorted articles into buckets for with release and non-critical. Non-critical meaning that they could stand to wait until after release because it's either a single image or it's a low traffic article, something like that. So we've learned to mold our scoping process to the current need, not necessarily just rigidly follow what we've defined in our internal documentation. We also added in this support screenshots section for our, we tapped one of our awesome Turkish support team members, shout out to Ufukcan, to jump in and help us with screenshots to see if we could try to get this across the finish line and be release ready. Now, one thing I want to mention is that they did back off on a couple of the changes that were going to be included in this package, which kind of made me mad, but I've worked through that and I'm okay now. It didn't actually lighten our load really at all, and that it just means that we're going to have to retake a lot of the screenshots that we retook for this release. However, because we noted you can see right here, these are the release issues. We noted what part of the release was going to affect each article. This scope board is still valid beyond that April release that we just did, and we can use it for all that work that's coming up. So again, that's the power of the scoping and planning and noting those changes. So if you want the simplicity and sanity and glory of being release ready, I'll wrap up with some tips that we've learned along our journey. So when I started with Socio, now WebEx Events, there was a pretty large backlog of internal update requests waiting for me. And we had a few articles that were, well, a fair few articles, that were out of date. And it was a lot of work to catch up with all of that backlog while learning a new platform. And it's also been a journey to build up the tools and the processes and internal documentation and relationships that we needed to do release-ready docs. And it was daunting at first. So my best advice is just to get started right away. So survey your domain, take stock of what you have and what you need to do to achieve release readiness. And as you go, keep your style guide up to date. Y'all should know this by now. Document all the meetings and decisions and processes that you build day to day, and forge relationships and communication channels. And if there are tools that you want that will make you better and faster, approach your managers and your leaders about getting those tools. Pardon me. Pursue efficiency in everything that you do, because being efficient will only help you to be release ready when those releases are coming thick and fast. So this does take effort. Do not be deceived. And finally, never stop iterating on your processes. So we're constantly finding little ways to be a little more efficient, to be a little better at communication, etc. Now, you may have noticed that I kind of skimmed over relationships and communication. That's because I have several slides dedicated to just those, because they're so important. Now, first of all, we have to approach with a healthy mentality about our own worth. Now, this is current me preaching to younger me, so bear with me. What I would love to tell my younger self is that I deserve a seat at the table. People sometimes are hesitant to get in touch with product teams and ask them for things because they feel like they're not going to be heard, or they're too siloed, or they're too busy, and maybe they haven't been treated so well in the past. The truth is, our companies hired us to do a specific job and to do it well, and that requires working with other teams. So let's not cringe or apologize our way into conversations with product teams. We can make reasonable requests and stand our ground on the things that will make our work better and easier. So find out who does what, approach boldly but not loudly or making demands, and start asking questions. Ask for inclusion in any of their existing kickoff meetings that they have with their designers, their developers. Ask for monthly touch points with product managers so you can ask questions and root out those small changes that have a huge impact that the PMs may not realize will have a huge impact. Ask for access to release boards, pardon, so you can investigate things for yourself well ahead of when they would normally publish release notes. Ask for access to Figma design boards so that you can explore how things will work for yourself. And try to communicate a rough idea of what the impact to the articles may be as early as you're able to do that kind of finger in the wind assessment. That habitual awareness and feedback can start to train the product folks to proactively notice those small change, big impact items and be more proactive in communication with you. Along the way, always try to give back. As we're working in staging environments, pause to document issues you may find and report them in a clear and helpful way so that product can address those. Product and QA have benefited greatly from our issue reports and ferreting out little bugs that we've identified, as Amir here will tell you, has told us. They appreciate our early presence in staging, and I think if they were to lose that, they would be like, hey, where'd you go? Come back. So that's a good feeling too. If you have some content design training and your company doesn't have a content designer or a UX writer, keep your eyes open for opportunities to improve product copy. That kind of feedback is how I eventually became the company's official UX writer. And this backs up what Linda said earlier in her talk, where she was saying that you do the role first and then the title comes after. That's how I became a technical writer too. I started doing the writing and then I was like, wait a minute, I'm a technical writer. So this and the bug reporting can actually be huge for customer trust in the product as well. And guess what? When you have a say in what the product says, your documents are better for it. As a technical writer, there's nothing worse than documenting a product that's awkward to write about. So if you can help direct what it says and how things are worded, I've found it to be a wonderful thing. And then along the way, pay it forward too, by sharing your communication lines that you've developed and the information that you glean with other teams like marketing and support and sales and other content teams. And this can also help establish those recurring touch points. If product teams are balking at creating a new meeting for you, say, look, me and sales and marketing and support will all benefit from knowing what's coming, and our customers will be happier with up-to-date documents, and you'll be a hero. they're more likely to create those new meetings if there are more people to benefit from it. They'll also benefit more from eyes earlier. The people that write the code don't normally talk to customers, so bringing those other folks into the fold early will help to head off potential issues and help the product teams to create more helpful products from the get-go rather than compensating after the fact. I've seen that many times. And finally, make sure you appreciate everyone that helps you. And I'm going to wrap up my talk with a recommendation for another talk. So I really want to shout out Heather Stenson's Portland 2019 session where she talked about making friends of the docs. Is Heather here? I was hoping to meet her here because she's really impacted me. So it really inspired me. This talk inspired me to build a cycle of appreciation at WebEx events. And what she talked about in that talk also really helped me to build those relationships with the product folks that I've been talking about. So we also have a really high level of engagement with our documentation in our team. We get hundreds of feedback requests from the broader team with little, hey, I had a customer come to me with this little fringe case, things like that have really helped us enrich our documents beyond what we could in our very structured, siloed documenting space. So scan the QR code that leads to the Write the Docs website where Heather's talk is, and really take that to heart and consider implementing those in your own org. She did not pay me to say this. I just really love that talk. So that's my talk. Thank you for coming and listening and laughing at various times. I appreciate you, dude. You laughed. That's Enoch, isn't it? Yeah. Thanks, Enoch. I appreciate you. So I guess we're ready for the Q&A. Hopefully I haven't gone too far over. Oh, look at the time. Thank you. Oh. And if you want to connect with me, the LinkedIn QR code, LinkedIn URL. I'm also on the Write the Docs Slack, so hit me up there too. And say hi in the hallway. I should leave this over there.
Thank you, Daniel. That was really entertaining.
Thank you.
And useful.
I hope so.
I think we've got time for a couple of questions. So can you talk more about the 6-month audit cycle? What are you looking for, and what kind of updates get made as part of those regularly scheduled reviews?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as we're pursuing release readiness with our articles, we are trying to move quickly and implement the changes that are necessary for the release. We're not necessarily going through the whole article every time we make an edit for a release to make sure that everything matches up to current style standards. So the audit is meant to catch those edits that we would need to bring an article up to current style standards. And we do occasionally catch a broken link that we created earlier. We catch a missing image. We catch a place where an image could have been better, things like that. So it's a cycle that forces us to focus on looking at the article as a whole and also just assessing its integrity as an article. Maybe it needs to be, merged with another article or simplified greatly or split.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question from me then. Do you have any sort of automation built into that? Because I know that's...
Yeah, so we use Writer, which is kind of like Grammarly, but one really good thing about Writer is that they have a glossary feature so that you can plug in the terms from your style guide, and then as you're authoring, they have a Chrome plugin that will highlight words that are on your no-no list and make suggestions for words that are on your yes-yes list. So, and just changing those from a no to a yes word is just the matter of a click. They also have a really cool snippets feature so that you can just type 3 letters and summon in 2 paragraphs that you had pre-written and that helps us stay consistent with certain things.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah, we like it.
Probably just one more question, I guess. Any advice for being release ready when, this is good, when one team owns the help center and another team owns the other technical content? How do we not step on each other's toes?
That's a good question. We kind of have a conundrum like that with our learning content developers because the nature of learning content and videos, those are much more difficult to keep up to date. And so they are not currently able to be release ready. So we kind of just have an understanding that their content and our content will not be up to date all the same or at the same time. And They have found, though, our release readiness to be an asset because, again, they don't have to go to the engineering specs and the more technical release notes that the product people produce. They can just read the documents.
That's right. So they cut down on their documents in a way because you've already got the
Yeah,
docs
and they can
ready.
steal our content too, and they often
Content
do.
reuse, we
and
call
I'm happy.
it.
Yeah, happy to share.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've probably just run out of time there, but Daniel's around for the next couple of days. So anything about docs and the Shire, he's your man. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, y'all.